Hi, this is Elena Collum. My first name is Margaret, but I go by Elena, and I am going to be recording my video response to the Module 4, Chapters 5 and 6 video questions. So I'm going to start with number 1 that asks about you and your colleagues being faced with changes and the top 3 tips for adapting to changes. So, in considering the most effective ways to deal with change, each of the strategies mentioned in Table 5.2 of Chapter 5 are, in my opinion, excellent recommendations of how to tackle challenging circumstances. But I picked my top 3, of course. So the top 3 most effective strategies, in my opinion, are as follows. Number 1, realize that you cannot control all elements of life. Number 2, learn from previous experiences. You have met change before and survived. And number 3 is realize that others can help and you are not alone. So now here's my explanation for each one. To begin, I'll focus on that first tip that I mentioned, which was just realizing that you cannot control all elements of life. So anytime that I'm confronted with an obstacle or a challenge in my life, I believe that this tip is the most important reminder. Recognizing that certain things are out of your control can honestly feel like a burden is being lifted off of you just because you realize that it's not your fault when challenges arise. The only thing you have to worry about at that moment is how you respond to the change that has arisen. The next most valuable tip, in my opinion, was learning from personal experience and recognizing that you've survived change before and can do it all over again. So as an educator, one of the main things I like to remind myself of when I'm presented with a new problem or a change is my experience with my first year of teaching. So my first year of teaching was full of lots of challenges, and it was a wonderful year, but I just had so much information being thrown at me. So I went into my first year actually without a degree in education, so I had to obviously learn how to adapt and grow in my practice constantly. I relied on the feedback of other teacher leaders to support me through that first year, and I ended up having an excellent experience overall. When I face challenges now as a third-year teacher, I just remind myself that if I survived the challenges that I faced then, I can certainly survive them now. And then finally, the last tip that stood out to me was realizing that others can always help and that you're not alone in your struggle. This tip also relates to the experience that I just shared during my first year of teaching, just because I relied so much on other teacher leaders to help me through that first year. I still ask for help and for advice anytime that I need it because it's always comforting to know that you have people around you who are willing to support you. So that's it for question number 1. Question number 2 that asked about a success story that I had dealing with estranged parents that I could share with my colleagues. So I just want to begin by answering question 2 and just framing it to state that I seldom have issues with parents at my school. I'm very fortunate to work for an elementary school where parents are very supportive of their children and rarely reach out to question the teacher's methods or their authority in the classroom. But one interaction that came to mind with a parent when question 2 was posed in the video actually happened earlier this school year. So I was in a meeting after school when I was called to the office and informed that a parent was in the lobby and wanted to meet with me. And I was caught off guard, but I proceeded with the meeting to satisfy the request of the parent. So the parent reached out to me with a concern that they had about their child sitting next to another child who I knew, but the parent did not know, is in a foster home. And this child has been through a lot, and I knew that, but the parent was not aware. And so the parent proceeded to tell me some of the disturbing things that the foster child had said to their child, and was just reaching out and saying how inappropriate it was and how uncomfortable it made them feel that their child was being subjected to those inappropriate statements. And I informed the parent that I understood where they were coming from, but that, it was important to consider that children come from all different walks of life. And, maybe those things, even though they are disturbing to hear, that is that child's reality. And I actually left that meeting feeling a little bit frustrated with the other parent. One thing that bothered me about that meeting was the parent's lack of empathy toward the other child and their home situation. So in my opinion, what could have been a teachable moment for her child was instead one of condemnation of a student who came from a different background. Although I was disturbed by my conversation with this parent initially, I overall consider it to be a success story because she was content with our meeting after this conversation. I told her that I would resolve the issue, and I took care of it the next day. I made sure that the foster child was continuing to see the counselor to discuss his issues, and that he knew that adults were a better, I guess, buffer for that information, a better person to go to share their struggles in life rather than another child. But it really just opened my eyes to how much students are shaped by their home situations. So in my opinion, this experience related very closely to the Type 5 decision-making parental involvement strategy that was listed in Chapter 5. So to resolve issues like these in the future, I believe it would be beneficial to invite a diverse group of parents to serve on a parental advisory board, just to open their minds to what other students and their families might be facing at home. So fostering this open communication between the school, the teacher, and an array of different families would serve to benefit the students in their daily interactions with one another, and would provide the teacher with insight on how to most appropriately communicate with both parents and students. All right, so moving on to Chapter 6, question 3 in the video asked to focus on an example of having sat through different types of group meetings. And question number 3 specifically asked about what it was like to sit in a meeting that was led by someone who used the direct leadership style, and the pros and cons of that leadership style. So I'm also very fortunate in answering this question just to say that I work for a school where the administration leads in a way that values teachers' voices and fosters collaboration among colleagues. However, in my past job, before being an educator, I worked under a boss that used a direct leadership approach that offered little room for feedback from her employees. I sat under her leadership for many different meetings in which she simply barked orders and told her employees what she expected from them, but gave little to no time for employees to ask questions or to share their feedback on how work was going for them. Direct leadership can have several disadvantages, which primarily correlate to employee dissatisfaction and feelings of being overlooked or unappreciated. Negative employee sentiment can lead to the buildup of resentment over time as well. The only advantages that I could think of using a direct leadership style include the effectiveness of meeting an objective in a short period of time just by being in control and taking charge of the meeting. And then, of course, making sure that decisions can be made quickly after the meeting ends. But other than that, there really aren't very many advantages to direct leadership. On the other hand, question 4 asked about, same question, but just for the facilitator style approach instead. So this approach is, when this approach is taken by a leader, employee sentiment is much more positive because their feedback is taken into consideration. Good facilitators always allow an individual to have equity of voice in meetings, and they help establish group rules or guidelines to ensure that not just one person is dominating the meeting, including the facilitator themselves. So the pros of using the facilitator style approach is that employees feel like they're welcome to share their ideas freely and without judgment, which creates a positive work environment. A space of mutual respect is created when facilitators conduct meetings appropriately. The only downside to using the facilitator approach would be that, it could take more time to reach a consensus for the group, and potentially, decision making could take longer when there are more opinions to consider. However, this approach is definitely much more effective overall, and in every teacher leadership meeting that I've attended so far this school year, our administration has used this approach and has encouraged educators to share their opinions on a variety of issues that affect our school. My colleagues and I always appreciate the opportunity to use our voices to benefit our students and our coworkers to make our school a better place than it already is. Thank you very much for watching.